Hello, this is Nyambura Mundia. I am the host of Swaiba, the Audible African Woman. And this is our continued series on faith, feminism, and freedom. And this series has been interesting, but also heart-wrenching, but also very encouraging in many ways. One is because as we spoke about faith, feminism, and freedom, we realized how much faith can be a tool to help us be free as women and gender and sex minorities, but also realize that faith has been used against women and sex minorities for a long time. Today, we have our guest, Ms. Margaret Nyambura, who is a health lawyer and a program coordinator at KELiN, who will be introducing herself shortly. But she's here to help us unpack how religious norms and sexual reproductive health rights are related and what it is that religious communities can do. Just to say that sexuality and sexual reproductive health rights is sometimes seen as a very personal matter, but it's very political. I think I will stop here and let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Nyambura. It feels funny to say, hi, Nyambura. Welcome. Hi, thank you, Nyambura.
Yeah.
My name is Margaret Nyambura. I am a health lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
I am also Catholic.
Okay.
So it's very interesting to sit here with you and have a conversation on religious norms and sexual and reproductive health and rights, because this is what I do for a living. So how exactly am I myself carry my faith and my creed and what I profess into what I do for a living every day? It would be great to have this conversation with you today.
I like that you use the word creed because, well, that talks to dogma, also talks to how people practice faith. Also talks about how we elaborate our faith or, whether, our careers or our personal lives. I think you have alluded to it when you say you work with the religious leaders around, sexual reproductive health rights, but I would want to hear what has been your experience working with religious communities or faith communities.
Okay, Nyambura. So let's remember that religious leaders, religious communities, it's us, it's me and you.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably you in a couple of years. Let's say if you join the Women Guild at PCA.
I'm not joining Women's
I am
Guild.
looking forward to joining the Catholic Women's Association.
Okay.
Yes, I think the blue would look nice on me.
Oh, I'm not sure because I feel like, a point for discussion another day.
Okay, sure. So even after I put on let's say the head wrap or the hat of a religious leader, I will still have an everyday job. I'll probably be a doctor, I will be a teacher, I will be a nurse, I will be a caregiver.
Yeah.
Or even just the other roles we take on as mothers, right? So it's usually difficult to separate a person from their beliefs. I think they're ingrained in you and they're a part of who you are.
Yeah.
And whatever service delivery you do is probably
affected.
Yes.
Unimpacted. Yeah.
Yes, it's impacted, or it's actually the source of, yes. So that even when we're having a conversation and we say, when you do this, do it as if you're doing it for God.
That's true.
Yes.
That is religious norms right there.
Yes, that's religious norms right there. And what are norms exactly? Norms are acceptable standards that are not codified.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we are likely to have the same norms if we are Catholic. You are likely to have the same norms with somebody who is from a Pentecostal church. People from evangelical churches are also likely to have similar norms, because it's just some sort of orientation, isn't it? So I sometimes work with religious leaders because they sit alongside us when we are trying to conduct or facilitate public participation for any laws, policies, executive decisions that are about to be taken by the state, right? So I also work with them.
Yeah.
In their own private capacities as people. They are my friends. So religious communities, I am part of a religious community. So I mentioned that I profess the Catholic faith.
Yeah.
And Catholic Church, in our creed, both the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed, we mention that the Catholic Church is universal.
That's true. I mean, yes, it's actually a sentence in there.
Yeah.
In the creed.
In the creed, it is universal. So it consists of everybody. Not just everybody, because we have presence in every country in the world, and maybe because also we are the oldest, but also because we are inclusive. And that kind of inclusive language, that kind of...
The body of Christ is inclusive.
Yes, the body of Christ is inclusive, right?
Yeah.
Isn't also the call by Jesus to go out and make followers, all men followers of me, or I don't know, maybe the semantics.
Which is it's actually a commandment of love.
Yes.
In itself. Thank
you. It's also the second greatest commandment. Love your brother as you would love yourself.
Yeah.
So as a lawyer, especially working in sexual and reproductive health and rights at the Kenya Legal and Ethical Issues Network on HIV and AIDS, what we do is we advocate for health rights for all. For us, that is what justice looks like, because then we are helping to bring home the highest attainable standard of health. And that is justice from where we are seated. So perhaps what I did in my previous life as a dispute resolution lawyer, justice was, what's the commercial interest here? What was the contractual obligation? Was it met? So in the shoes that I wear right now, justice looks like, are you a person? Yes, you are. The human rights are inalienable. By inalienable, I mean they cannot be separated from each other. So as long as you're a person, then you deserve the highest attainable standard. You have a right to the highest attainable standard of health. So this accrues to you at birth. Our work is to facilitate both communities, rights holders and the duty bearers, on both ends. So capacity building for communities to also just teach them, this is what your right is. This is what happens with your body. Now this we are speaking about now sexual health. So this is what happens with your body. And therefore then they're in a position to hold the duty bearers responsible now for the sexual rights that are going now to culminate in the attainment of sexual health. So these two things are related. So inside there, I would also just like to mention that when we talk of sexuality, we like to think of intimacy, right? When you say intimacy, the next thing that comes to mind is closeness. Something else that also comes to mind is love. So where I come from at KELiN, love is what justice looks like. So justice is what love looks like in public, if I may put it like that. You know Cornel West?
I know Dr. Cornel West, and I told you he's running for a position. He's actually running for presidency in the US.
On what party?
I do not know. Maybe independent.
That would be very interesting.
Wow.
But so he said that justice is what love looks like in public.
In public,
And so in private, that's what tenderness would feel like, right? So if at all we are to follow the commandment of Christ, to love one another as you love yourself, then it's up to all of us to uphold justice.
Now, when I listen to you, I now understand who a health lawyer is. Because earlier on I was like, there's a health lawyer. Now, when you speak about things and how you intellect them in terms of the wholeness of a human being, but also the inalienability of the rights, I am actually starting to get it. And I also now appreciate why, in terms of when we talk about religious norms affecting us in terms of our careers, I can truly see that. And I see the passion, why you have the passion you have for what you do, because for you, it's the way justice, it's the way love is spoken, but it's also what justice looks like.
If I may, Nyambura, I just want to paint a picture for how human rights are inalienable. So let's remember that the right to the highest attainable standard of health you find it in Article 43, right, of the Constitution of Kenya.
Yes.
So there, together, we have bundled socio-economic rights, right? So the right to health is put together with the right to housing, water, sanitation, education, right? Because all these things depend on each other. There's some sort of domino effect. So it is only, they actually are delivered together, or the delivery of one depends on the delivery of another.
Yes.
So they are bundled together. So they are socioeconomic rights. So they talk to what our dignity. So human dignity, they speak to human dignity. They also speak to life itself under Article 26. So imagine now you are Nyambura, I am Nyambura, we are seated here, we are alive, right?
Yeah.
But then I'm struggling with some sort of disease right now. So what would the quality of my life be?
Lower?
Maybe, yes, definitely lower. So can you also just imagine what constraints I would suffer economically if then there were barriers for me to access medical interventions to restore me to full capacity, if I may put it like that, and now enjoy life as every other human being does.
Yeah. I see that how it would be taken away from every when you say they are intellect, they're actually very intellect. But the problem is that we tend to separate them. I think to help us shed more light into what you just said, I want to cite a case that an ongoing petition at the High Court against the Cabinet Secretary of Ministry of Health, where it's being let me say this. Challenging constitutionality of the National Reproductive Health Policy 2020 to 2023 due to procedural and substantive elements. Could you please give us an overview of the policy, the procedure followed in its passing, and the problematic substantive elements on it? Sorry, I sound like a lawyer at that point. I had to actually read it because, man, substantive, problematic, But yes, you get what I'm asking, please.
Yeah, and that's how I also usually sound when I wax on about a policy.
Yeah, okay. So I'm not doing too badly. Okay.
Okay. So the National Reproductive Health Policy 2022 to 2032 is currently in place. So KELiN is the fourth petitioner in petition number 27 of 2022. And together with like-minded organizations and individuals, we moved to court to just prevent the implementation of the policy because we felt that it was lacking as far as some substantive elements and procedural elements are concerned. By substantive, I mean the contents in themselves. Some of the contents are problematic or they raise questions that need to be answered before implementation takes place. And procedural, I mean, there are usually some steps that a policy needs to go through before it is given a clean bill of health and therefore going on into implementation. So let's start with procedural. So procedurally, we all love public participation, right? Because all of us want to feel like our take was considered,
it's a crucial step to making laws, right?
Yes. It's covered in Article 10. It's one of our national values and principles. And we also just want to feel like we were not left out. Remember, because that's one of the reasons why we are also really excited about the BOMAS process. So now that we are covering religious norms, let me just mention that you remember that a larger battalion of the No campaign was religious leaders.
Yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately or fortunately, the Constitution passed. And with the clause in Article 26.4 that speaks to the restricted manner of abortion in Kenya. That is the 4 grounds of, in the opinion of a trained health professional, there is an emergency, the life of the mother is at risk, the health of the mother is at risk, or in accordance with any other existing or written law.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So now the reason for the no was the presence of the Article 26, at least for the larger religious group that was against the Constitution of Kenya 2010, but has since been passed. Right? And implementation has got to go on, because then after that article is in the Constitution, then it is the responsibility of the Cabinet Secretary for Health to ensure that legislation is the laws made in Parliament, have been passed to support the attainment of that right.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So now the lawmaking process in Kenya sits this way. So we usually have policies at the top. So naturally, in every other place in the world, you may have the word policy refer to both a legislation, a statute, a regulation, but in Kenya we have a policy as the document that just sets the tone. So it's the larger framework at the top, and it's almost like the way you would classify a vision and a mission statement for an organization.
Thank you very much.
Yes. So vision statements are broader. Missions are now.
Narrower.
Narrower. They are giving you a roadmap. Yes. So now we have policy documents at the top, and then now the policy document advises the legislative process, and then now with the legislative process, in Parliament, both houses, so National Assembly or our Senate, in the case of any laws that have got anything to do with the counties are concerned. And then after that, out of that, you get powers to the responsible cabinet secretaries once again to make any regulations. Now, these are more practical bits, and they're like the executive decisions. And then out of that, sometimes you have guidelines. So that's the hierarchy. Yes. So now a policy document is going to set the tone for everything that happens in that sphere. So in this case, the National Reproductive Health Policy set the tone for every other law-making activity in the years between 2022 to 2032. So do you now see how problematic it would be if your views, my views, the views of a 24-year-old girl, the views of a 19-year-old girl, the views of a 53-year-old woman who is going through menopause are not considered in the making of the policy, right? So that's the procedural limb that failed. On the grounds of public policy. Substantially, it is lacking on so many fronts, but one that is specifically worrying is that it sets the age for consent for sexual activity, or rather, it supposes that at 21 is when you have got the competence to seek out services of a reproductive nature if you're a woman. So this is problematic where I'm sitting, because if we set the age of majority at 18, why then are we having a higher threshold for seeking reproductive services? What happens then for people between 18 to 21? So this was done without a legal basis and without a scientific basis. So even when you have a look at the, monitoring, evaluation, and learning aspects of the framework at the end, of the policy, at the end, there is no explanation.
It's also very inconsistent.
Yes, it is inconsistent. Thank you for pointing that out. Remember, because one of the aspects that a law should have is they should be consistent, especially if they are regulating a space like health. We should have consistency from the policy to the Health Act to every other related legislation. So if you're only opening up for women after 21, and then if you're only providing family planning services for married women, so it actually only makes reference to the needy married people. So on a needs basis for needy married people. So what happens for everybody else?
Confining the right to marriage.
So you see then,
secluding.
Yes, this is secluding. Then also you have also just added another bottleneck for seeking the service, yet it is guaranteed in the Constitution. So from where I'm sitting, it's discriminatory, because remember, Article 27 of the Constitution says you should not be discriminated on grounds of marriage, gender, age, pregnancy, HIV status, right? So it is discriminatory. So something else, it also does not reflect the realities of lived realities of young women, because then if you cap reproductive health services between the age of 24 to 49. So that is the age gap that has been planned for. So remember, maybe I did not mention this when I was getting started, but politics simply tell you what to do with power and wealth. And you cannot separate politics from law, because they inform each other and they're informed by each other.
That's true.
Right? So when you have a change of government, you always feel the information bit.
Yes, that is true.
Yes, you always feel it. So remember that if you're having a broader framework in a policy document, and you are sitting in a political office, because then you're sitting at the Ministry of Health, and that's the reason why Ministry of Health is one of the respondents in the petition, then you're also having the budgeting aspect at the back of your mind. So you are occupying a political seat. You're thinking of the financial implication at the back of your mind, and then you're only planning for people between 24 to 49 years.
What happens to the rest of the population, though?
And this is exactly why then politics has everything to do with just what you can do with your power and your wealth. So this is why the Ministry of Health is a respondent, because then we are saying what exactly advise the decision to cap it between 24 to 49. What happens to the menopausal woman? What happens to the adolescent girl who is already experiencing the monthly flow? And there's also just, even before we get to provision of sanitary towels by the government, even before
hygiene, and management.
Yes, just before we get there, just basic things like sexual violence. Yes. So then what happens if you're a survivor or a victim of sexual violence before the ages of 24? Where then are you going to seek your reproductive health or reproductive rights from?
You're actually cut off by the system. There's no framework that helps you or will assist you.
So these are some of the substantive elements which are off on the policy document. And that's why KELiN is a fourth petitioner in petition number 27.
I want to ask the question, and I think you've alluded to it. how does this then affect future legislation on matters of reproductive health rights in Kenya?
Okay.
And we can touch on, maternal, newborn, and child health bill, 2023.
So remember we mentioned that the policy is going to set the tone for every follow-up, every legislative process, every executive decision. It has to be in tandem with the provisions of the policy. So if they're problematic, everything that flows then has a justification for any issues. So for instance, right now in Senate, we've just closed the public participation bit as far as receipt of memoranda from the public goes on the maternal, newborn and child health bill. So this bill, I think, is at the Senate because remember, health is a devolved function.
Yeah.
By devolved, I mean it is shared by the national government and the county government.
Yeah.
Yes. Some specific specialities left at the national government, but most of the bulk of the work as far as health service delivery is at the county government level. So just a quick skimming through the bill, you get the sense that county executive members, the ones for health, the ones for health, have been given the duty to supervise, to coordinate, and to implement all that is foreseen in the maternal, newborn, and child health bill. So then one of the questions that this begs is that, does this therefore mean that we should have a requirement for these CECs to be health professionals for the purposes of the Health Act? And by that I mean, then should they be doctors?
Should be the doctors. That's
should they be doctors? Should they be all the whole list of
medical
professionals?
medical health professionals.
As far as the Health Act goes, should they be doctors? Should they be nurses? Should they be
gynecologists?
Yeah. So gynas are specialized doctors. Should they be COs? Yeah. So that's a question that comes up, and then it would also be very questionable to have a bill that talks about just before a woman of childbearing age gets pregnant, the pregnancy period, delivery, and postpartum, and not address the issue of obstetric violence. So for years on end, we've been talking about obstetric violence. I remember when Sonko used to be governor in Nairobi, used to do the impromptu visits to
money.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you remember sometimes he would say he found persons who are in labor not getting adequate attention.
Sleeping on the floor. Yeah.
Persons just wailing because of prolonged labor. Just the consequences that prolonged labor could have. There's obstetric fistula, There's also just postpartum depression. Yeah. So aspects like this need to be covered by such a bill so that it is inclusive and doesn't leave any gaps. Because then remember, what's that we say about necessity being the mother of invention?
Yes. Yeah.
So if we've had a societal problem and you have an opportunity to capture it and give the responsibility of, responses, any redress mechanisms, it should be captured in this maternal, newborn and child health bill. Right?
Yeah,
so you see, for instance, if obstetric violence was captured in the National Reproductive Health Policy 2022 to 2032, we would have a mention of it in the maternal, newborn and child health bill. But thank goodness for public participation, because I am aware that one of the memoranda that was submitted did actually mention that, hey, where is the mention of obstetric violence? Don't you think it's time for us to have a redress mechanism for this? And remember, obstetric violence is SGBV on a person who is either pregnant during delivery or just after delivery. Yeah, so this is
so rampant in this country, but we never really talk about it. Or we talk about it, but then, as you say, there's no measures of redress.
Yeah, but we are hoping now then there's going to be
a redress.
Yeah, redress mechanism.
Nyambura, thank you so much. I feel like we need to split this conversation into two, because the next questions I want to ask, and thank you so much, because I feel like that is a whole, chunk of information that is not out there. But also thank you for layering it out for us so that because I think we speak about things, but we speak about things devoid of processes. And sometimes even when we want to pour into a process, as whether religious communities,
we don't know how to,
what
the process
entry
is
points
practical.
Yeah. So you breaking it down, I think, also allows us in terms of strategy, especially for people who work in these communities. Because sometimes we have progressive religious leaders, but they're like, so where, how, and so just listening to you it almost maps out where the entry points would be, you
Yeah.
know. So thank you so much.
Okay.
I want us to have a conversation about comprehensive sexual education, but I feel like this should be a section B. So please stay tuned. We'll have a section B where we can talk about is the conversation around, you know, comprehensive sexual education out of the world, and why is it too polarized? Because I think we miss a lot of the things by just, you know, speaking against each other. But also media sometimes that does help, because it says the word I can also be, because I'm from Yuri. But yeah, please tune in, and thank you very much.
Okay.
Sensationalization. I said it. Anyway.
I'm looking forward to that, Nyambura. And just to preempt, it's disagreeable and therefore it's not popular, but it has to be discussed. So please, let's see you in part 2.
Well, thank you very much.